Let's pray. Father God, I hope and pray that that is completely true this morning, that we pour out our praise to you only. Not the world, not our situation, not our circumstances, not even a person. As wonderful and helpful as people can sometimes be. God, that literally our praise goes only to you this morning. Everything we sing, everything that's said. God, I just pray you'll guide everything that happens this morning. I pray that you'll be near every single person who is with us this morning. In separate places, bonded by the Spirit, going through separate things. You know all of those things. Be near them, hold them, carry them, lift them, speak to them, guide them. We love you. We need you. And we do all of this in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen. So church, I am particularly excited about the message this morning. To be honest with you guys, this sermon is one I've wanted to do for a long time, like literally years, and I feel like it's a sermon, it's a message that God's been writing in me for a long time. Job is one of my favorite books in the Bible, so I don't know what that says about me, but it does. It's as strange and as hard as a book it is one of my favorite books. Some believe it might even be the oldest book in the Bible, that it might have been the first one ever actually written down, and it's got some challenging characters in it, and those challenging characters, I think if we're honest, we can find ourselves in. And so what we're going to be talking about today are hope dopes. What we can learn and unlearn from Job's friends. And I want you to notice, at least at this point, I've got the friends in quotes because I'm not sure everything they did was super friendly. And to be clear, I think each and every one of us can find ourselves in the shoes of these friends if we're not careful. Before we get into the text itself, I want you just to take a look at this image. I love this particular illustration of one of the scenes, how it might have gone down with Job and his friends. You've got Job, the one who's very despondent, wearing almost no clothes, just basically covered with sackcloth. He looks very down, and his three friends to help him. One of them is literally towering over him like he's got it all figured out. And he's actually coming down on Job, who frankly doesn't need it at this point. And then you'll notice there's someone outside. We're going to get to him, and you'll also notice there is a particular light and power that's going on outside, and that's going to be God, and God's going to get his role in this as well. But what I hope that each and every one of us remember from this is that we can find ourselves in the position of each of the characters in Job, and ultimately the one who speaks last is the one we need to listen to, and that would be the Lord, who speaks towards the end in Job. Now, before we get into it, I want to share with you guys, just for perspective, we're just coming off of Christmas a couple days ago, and I don't know if you guys have ever gone through this. Maybe you've actually gone through this very past Christmas, but I don't know if you've ever gone through a situation where you had that one Christmas gift you really, 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 really wanted. Like when you filled out your wish list, if you did a written wish list, the top of the list, like it was super easy. You're like, I want this. And when everyone asked, like you told them, I want this. And I remember this one year, I really, 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 really wanted a Nintendo video game system. Yes, the original. I'm dating myself here. I mean like the original Nintendo console, and I wanted one so bad. I can still to this day remember playing like TNC Surf Design. They've got to bring it back. One of my favorite games all time, and I loved playing that game and many others on my Nintendo. And I remember the year I really wanted it. It's on the top of my wish list. Everybody knew. I'm wishing on the first star I'd seen. I told Santa, right? Like that matters. And I really, really wanted this thing. And I remember Christmas morning, and I would open up each gift, and I'd open up each gift, and I'd open up one gift, and I'd be like, yeah, this is cool, but it's not a Nintendo. And I'd go to the next gift, and I'd unwrap it, and I'd be like, oh, this is great, but it's not the Nintendo. And so I'd keep opening, and I got to the end, I was like, I didn't get it. Where's my Nintendo? And to be clear, I ended up getting the Nintendo. That's why I'm telling you, right? Like I remember playing all the games. My parents were and are super great gift givers. I think it's actually what made it so weird on this particular year to not get the one thing I wanted. But for whatever reason, whether it was my parents' wisdom, I wasn't old enough, who knows why, I didn't get it that one particular year. I probably got it for my birthday or the very next year. But I remember having that huge hope about that thing I really wanted to happen, and then it didn't happen. And I remember how that felt. And I also know that this year, we've had this situation, and I have to confess to you guys, that I found myself in a position where I was so excited about New Year. I remember telling you guys, I literally in my head, and I've done this multiple times in my head, I've been practicing in my head like, Happy New Year! And I literally in my head was super excited about this new year to come, like what would happen on January 1st, right? That all of a sudden in the new year we would be able to, if we can go to the next slide, Evan, I don't know what's going on. We can just help me advance to the next one. Seems to be stuck. There we go. Like as if all of a sudden on January 1st we're going to get to this position, right, where we get to completely move on with everything from 2020, and then 2021 is going to be completely new and improved. Right? But I have to confess to you guys, and I have to apologize to you guys, because I don't know that we can literally come to January 1st and say, the ball dropped, COVID's gone. The ball dropped, all the masks come off, we can all go back outside, we can all hang out, there's going to be vaccines for 7.6 billion people, we can all go back to work, whatever our hope is in, right? I don't think we can sit here and say that when the new year starts, everything is going to be fixed. We can't say that in this new year. We don't know whether that's going to happen in this new year. Evan, can you help me go to the next one? There we go. This meme, I hope this is wrong, but this one really got my attention. What if 2020 is just a trailer of 2021? The reality is we don't know. And the question I want to ask you guys before we even get into the amazing book of Job is, in what or who do you put your hope? In what or who do we put our hope? Is it in the world? Is it in our circumstances? Is it in our situation? Or is it in God? And you don't have to answer this for me. We do need to answer this for God. Before God at some point in our lives. And we're going to learn a lot today from Job's friends. If you are looking for baby names, I offer up the following: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, or Zophar the Naamathite. These three guys show up allegedly to help Job, and they help a little bit, and then they don't. So to understand what happens, we do need to know the background of Job. So I'm going to read Job 1. Feel free to read this along with me. Here is the first part. This is how it all starts for Job and his friends. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And the man was blameless, upright, fearing God and turning away from evil. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And that man was the greatest of all the men of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of feasting had completed their cycle, Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "Perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Now there's a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" Pretty good question. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "From roaming about on the earth and walking around on it." We get to see that like every single day. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there's no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him in his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you to your face." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not put forth your hand on him." So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. Now on the day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabeans attacked and took them. They also slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and took them and slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another also came and said, "Your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. And it fell on the young people, and they died. And I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Through all this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. Even one of the people who came to report the news, do you notice this? Said the fire of God fell from heaven. Right off the bat, they're putting the blame for what happened on God. Now, before we even get to the friends that show up, it's really, really, really important you understand Job's background. Because if you don't understand this, the whole rest of the message, frankly, is not going to make sense. Okay? Job was tested precisely because his faith was strong. Job was tested precisely because he had done everything right. He had done nothing wrong. This wasn't a test because God's like, "Hey, I wonder if Job really believes me." God knew Job really believed in him. And so he said, okay, we can allow this almost unbelievable challenge and test to occur because he had strong faith, because he had done everything right. So knowing that, and now we know what happened to him, now let's see what happens when the friends showed up. Job 2:11 through 13. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, they came each one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. And they made an appointment together to come to sympathize with him and comfort him. When they lifted up their eyes at a distance and did not recognize him, they raised their voices and wept. And each of them tore his robe, and they threw dust over their heads toward the sky. Then they sat down on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, with no one speaking a word to him, for they saw that his pain was very great. At this point, they have a perfect record. Silent presence is always a solid start when someone is grieving. Whether they've just lost basically everything, or they're about to lose everything, or someone has just lost someone or something, or they're on that final bed, one of the best things you can do is say nothing. Just be there. Just be present. And at least at this point, they're doing this right. But then, and we're going to get into it in a minute, they decided to open their mouths. We have got to be so careful when we speak. In any situation, let alone the bad ones. We have to be so careful when we speak. And when I think about this, I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes from one of my all-time favorite presidents. Abraham Lincoln said, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt." I love this quote for so many reasons, on so many levels. But one of the things he acknowledges is that implicitly in each and every one of us, including himself, by the way, is a fool. So we've got to be careful every time we speak, even when we mean well. Because we've already learned that these 3 guys wanted to help Job, right? But I love this quote, "God save us from people who mean well." Sometimes people mean incredibly well, and they want to help. But what happens? A little bit different than that. Thomas Tracy wrote a great article comparing the theologies of Job to that of his friends, and he does a really good job of explaining where Job's friends went wrong. He put it this way: their attempts to explain Job's suffering lead them to condemn him rather than to comfort him. To condemn him rather than to comfort him. Here's the problem, very basically, with the friends. The friends, okay, believe in a concept called retribution. And before I tell you what it means, it's actually a very simple concept. I just want to give you an illustration of what they believe, and you can see it from some of the things they say. First, we're going to take a look at Eliphaz and one of the things he says to Job. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered. He answers Job, "Should the wise answer with windy knowledge and fill themselves with the east wind? Should they argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which they can do no good? But you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, not I. Your own lips testify against you." Great friends, right? Show up. Job is completely suffering, lost basically everything. And they have said to him, "Job, we know you've messed up because you're suffering." That's why he says your iniquity teaches your mouth. The only reason, Job, for you possibly to be hurting is because you have messed up, because that's what retribution, at least in their mind, is all about. That's what retribution is limited to. And the idea, again, is a very simple one. The idea is if you suffer, you've sinned or done something to deserve that. If I suffer, it's because I've made a mistake and thus I am suffering. Now, retribution is a concept, not the only concept. It is a concept that does come out of the Bible. It's the simple eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing. Okay? But the reality is we have to remember that the God in whom we believe is beyond retribution. The problem with simple retribution and providing this type of comfort, and I put comfort here in quotes, is all it does is add insult to injury. Job knows he's hurting. He doesn't need them to say, "You're hurting because you have done this and you have done this," and it causes him to even start to question the faith in the God that got him there in the first place. This type of thing, particularly in this moment, doesn't help, and it is limited in their view of who God is. Now, why does this matter? We sit here at the end of a year. It's been a little bit painful. And we've all said and thought many things about this particular year. I've already told you, I even had this concept in my head that, man, 2020 is rough, but just get me into 2020 and everything is going to be better next year, right? But one of the other things that we have heard a lot of people say this year is when we look at the pain and suffering that we collectively have endured, is that we're enduring that perhaps because we have made mistakes and sinned and put ourselves into this position. I have heard individuals, I have heard pastors on large stages, literally on the mall in DC, saying that we're in this situation because of our past sin, and if we would only change our behavior, everything would get better. We don't know that. God does. Now, to be clear, I do think we, and when I say we, I mean me, I mean Christians, I mean as a country, we've made mistakes, absolutely. But to confine our situation to a simple idea like retribution is limiting to who God is. It's limiting to even the things that have happened this year. I've seen amazing things that God has done in 2020. I've seen remarkable blessing in the lives of myself and others in 2020. What if it's a little bit more complex than that? What if God is a lot bigger than that? Because the reality is that God, and when I say God, I mean Old Testament God, New Testament God. His grace and his mercy silence retribution. This is the same God who, after telling Adam and Eve what to do, and they didn't do it, and he still had them leave the Garden of Eden, he didn't abandon them. Pursued them, he stayed with them, he stayed with their kids, he stayed with their kids' kids, and he stayed with those kids all the way up to today, and now he's included us, thanks be to his son, Christ Jesus, because of his grace, because of his mercy, because he's not limited to a concept of retribution. If they do good, it's good. If bad, bad. He's not limited to that because he's God. And we have to sit under that. We have to expect that. And in Jesus Christ, we get to expect that. We just celebrated that on Christmas, right? That God proved he's a God of grace and mercy by sending his son into this broken world. And so in Jesus, we get to say, yeah, retribution, it's an idea, but it's overly simplistic when we think about the scope of who God is, even though we can't wrap our minds and our hearts completely around him. And that's one of the lessons for Job and for his friends and for us. Now remember, this grace that we've just talked about, this is a grace that comes from God. Absolutely. God is grace. But it doesn't necessarily show up from the world. The world is not as gracious with us as God is with us. And what I want to do is share a quote. One of the things that Job said in here, that when I read it the last couple of weeks, it reminded me of thoughts I've literally had just this past year. He said, like a slave who longs for the shadow and like laborers who look for their wages, so I am allotted months of emptiness and nights of misery are apportioned to me. I don't know about you guys, but 2020 in some sense it seemed like the longest year ever. Like there have been months I've been like, is this over yet? Like, oh my gosh, the emptiness, the nights of misery. I still am having issues sleeping. I don't sleep like I used to. This has just been a really challenging year. And I think Job understands that times like 1,000. What Job went through in one day, did you notice this all in one day? He lost thousands of livestock. He lost property. He lost his kids, 10 kids. What Job went through in one day makes 2020 look like nothing. This guy understands our pain and then some. He said in Job 10:1, I loathe my life. I'll give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I think if we look at this, he starts out fine. It's okay to get to points where we say, man, I loathe my life. I give free utterance to complain. It's okay to complain to God. I think Job starts to head down a dangerous road where he speaks out of the bitterness of his soul, where he starts to say this is happening out of upset or anger or frustration, perhaps with God. This is where the three friends show up and not help. Starting with Eliphaz in Job 4:6, where he says, is not your fear of God your confidence, and the integrity of your ways your hope? See the challenge in the thinking? He starts out okay. Your fear of God actually should be your confidence. That's correct. Fear of God is where we get our wisdom. It's where we get our confidence and our hope. Then he says, is the integrity of your ways your hope? Again, it's this idea of retribution. If you had done everything right, Job, you wouldn't be hurting. And if and when you do, Job, everything will be okay. Think about how this might apply to us. I've got a bunch of questions for you guys. These aren't questions necessarily to answer for me. These are questions I think we all have to answer before God. Where's your hope? Is it in you or him? What I mean by hope and what I mean by is it in you is what Eliphaz is trying to get at in Job. If you do everything right, will everything be okay? Or is your hope in a God who is greater than all of that? Is your hope in you, or is it in him? Where do you put your hope? And it's not just limited to you, right? Is your hope in people in general? Is your hope in the world situation? Is your hope in a government? Is your hope in a leader? Is your hope in a mask? Is your hope in a vaccine? Where is your hope? Is your hope that 2021 has to be better than 2020? Or are we open to maybe it's going to be worse, or we don't even know. But you know what? I have hope in one who does. And when we get to that point, we can get to the road that God is trying to get all of us to go down. So here's Zophar. I think Zophar is even a little bit worse than Eliphaz. He says to Job confidently, you will forget your misery. You'll remember it as waters that have passed away. As your life will be brighter than the noonday, its darkness will be like the morning. And you'll have confidence because there's hope. You will be protected and take your rest in safety. This guy, to me, just rings of like prosperity and goodness. And man, everything is going to be okay, Job. You just got to hang in there a little bit longer. And so again, I think this rings this question for us, is where is our hope? Is our hope in protection? In other words, God's good if I don't get sick. God's good if I do get sick, but I recover. God's good if my life situation goes perfectly and everything ends up great. Is our hope in being protected from things, or is our hope in the God who's in charge of all things? Is our hope in safety? That's what he's trying to get Job to believe, that you're going to be safe someday. Everything will be okay someday. Is that our hope? That we're going to be safe? If that's true, Jesus gets pretty convicting. Because Jesus flat out told us that we will be persecuted because of our belief in him. And then he lived it out. And so if our hope is in safety, this is going to be a pretty challenging road to walk to follow him. Where is our hope? And then Bildad, he pipes in and says, if you're pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore to you your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. He's like a combination of both of their problems, right? He says, if you're pure and upright, Job, surely then God's going to get up and fix you. Job was pure and upright in the first place. Okay, remember Job's hearing this. And he says, though your beginning was small, don't worry, tomorrow's going to be awesome. They don't know that. We don't know that. Is our hope, is our thinking, again, this is basic retribution. Is our thought this: if we're good, then good things will happen. But if we're bad, bad things will happen. And the challenge, again, with this type of thinking is some of the stuff we've had to hear and endure this year. The people say things are bad because we have been bad. That might be true. I don't know because I'm not God. But to limit it to that, I think, confines our understanding of God. And most importantly, where we put our hope. Is our hope in a concept like retribution? Or is our hope in a God who is up to far more than I can tell you right now, I can see or ask or imagine? Where is our hope? Can we say what Bildad says, that literally the best is yet to come? Don't worry, because tomorrow everything's going to be okay. Can we say that? If we read this book, like the whole thing, all the way to the end, the answer is not necessarily. This trajectory of this book and this earth and this life and this world is that there's going to come a point where 2020 is going to look pretty sweet. Ultimately, our hope is in a life that is well beyond this earth and the things that we're enduring. My daughter, for whatever reason, she is locked into this idea of new earth. She loves the idea of new earth. It's almost like this place, it's this space and time. And so she will say to us, I love you to the new earth. She already has in her head this expectation that transcends this world that we are sitting on and standing on, because she recognizes implicitly, maybe because she's gone through 2020 at the age of 5, that this earth isn't going to fulfill the hopes that we have. This earth ultimately is not going to cut it. Now, one of the people in this amazing story gets it, and I'm very grateful he's here. His name is Elihu, and I don't even need to introduce this guy because he does a marvelous job of introducing himself here in Job 32, verses 1 through 9. So Job complains, buddies respond. Job complains, buddies respond. Job complains, Elihu steps in. Then these 3 men ceased answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. But the anger of Elihu, the son of Barachel the Buzite of the family of Ram, burned. Against Job his anger burned because he justified himself before God. And his anger burned against his 3 friends because they had found no answer and yet had condemned Job. Now Elihu had waited to speak to Job because they were years older than he. And when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, his anger burned. So Elihu the son of Barachel the Buzite spoke out and said, I am young in years and you are old. Light introduction, right? Therefore, I was shy and afraid to tell you what I think. I thought age should speak and increased years should teach wisdom, but it is a spirit in man, and the breath of the Almighty gives them understanding. The abundant in years may not be wise, nor may elders understand justice. This guy is pulling no punches. The little guy, best said the young guy, decides to pipe up and share his thoughts on this massive debate that apparently he's gotten to overhear. And remember, he says this after Job gives his final defense, because at this point, Job is defending himself to his friends, right? Job's hurting, friends show up, 7 days, 7 nights, all good, then they open their mouths. They're basically saying, Job, you're hurting because you deserve it. Job says, and he says a whole bunch of other stuff, and then Elihu says this, but in this you are not right. And he's talking to Job here. I will answer you. God's greater than any mortal. Why do you contend against him, saying he will answer none of my words? One of the things Elihu causes Job and the three friends and all of the rest of us to ask, and I hope to answer in our hearts and minds, is where is our problem? Is our problem with God, or is our problem with the world? And I mean this in our situation today as we come to the end of a year that's been pretty challenging and surprising and unexpected. Where's our problem? Where's my complaint? Where's my concern? Is it with the God who saw 2020 coming? Or is it with the world who's let me down and you down, I'm sure, quite a bit in 2020? Where is our problem? We have to answer that, because the answer to that will direct our hope. Is our problem with God, or is our problem with the world? When things were at their worst this year, were you angry with God, or were you angry with the world? Were you angry maybe with some person in the world? But the answer to that will impact where we put our hope. Elihu says this is, therefore, hear me, you who have sense. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong. And this guy is going after it. You who have sense. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't do anything wrong. The God that one of the servants assigned the fire to, right? He's like, God is not the one who does the wickedness. God doesn't do anything wrong. And if you have sense, you understand that. Now, this sense thing, what is this sense that he's alluding to? There's a phrase that oftentimes people use, common sense. And one of the many things we've been able to learn in 2020 is that it turns out that common sense is pretty uncommon. Right? What we thought was common sense for people to do or understand or to think or say, we get to years like this, we're like, wow, maybe it's not so widespread in the first place. What is common sense anyway? What he's getting at, the sense he's getting at, it's not common sense, it's not in senses like our touch or our taste or our smell. The true sense he's getting at is, what do you sense about the character of God? Who is God for you guys? Who is it for Job? Who is it for the three friends, the hope dopes? Who is it for us? Who, as it turns out, can be hope dopes every once in a while? Who is God? Is he good? Is he the God of grace and truth and justice and forgiveness and mercy and love? Or is he someone else? Is he limited by our understanding, or is he bigger than anything we can ask or imagine? The sense he wants us to get it is, who is the character of the Almighty? Job's cry, Job's question is probably one of the best questions we could answer. And earlier on, when he was responding to his friends, he cried out, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? And I understand what he's getting. He's saying, where is my hope? My hope was in God. All this rough stuff happened. Where are you, God? Who will see my hope? And I understand the complaint. I understand the cry. But these are questions that are just as important for us to answer. Where then is our hope? Is it in God? Or is it in the world? Is it in our situation? Is it in our positive things? Is it in our expectation of what's going to happen in the world? Or is it beyond then? Where then is our hope? And the answer to the first question absolutely impacts the second question. Who will see my hope? Now, Job here is complaining, who will see my hope? Will God see my hope? But for us, when we look at this question, we can absolutely affirmatively answer the second question and say, everyone. Everyone will see our hope. Whether our hope is in God or our hope is in the world. Especially in a year like 2020. 2020 gives us a remarkable opportunity to say, this is where my hope is. Because if my hope is in God in 2020, we can actually smile. We can actually laugh. We can actually say, hey, my life, my hope, my heart, and my mind are not limited to what I've endured and what we've encountered. It's beyond that. Everyone gets to see that our hope is transcendent in our circumstances if we hope in God. Or, if we hope in the world, we go through a year like 2020 or whatever rough situation we go through, and we let that situation knock us down. We let that situation destroy our hope. You see the difference? It's a big difference. Where then is my hope? Is it in God or is it in the world? Who's going to see it? Everybody. Regardless of the answer, everyone is going to see that hope. And if our hope is in God, I would think years like 2020 give us a remarkable opportunity to share that hope that transcends our situation. Whatever comes in 2021. 2021 might be the absolute best year ever. Or not. I don't know. But I know who does. The one who finishes out Job. So the Lord has something to say about this. And we picture Elihu, right? Elihu somehow hears all of this. And then I picture God, like he hears all of it, including the stuff that's going on in their hearts and in their minds. And he has some stuff to say. One of the cool things about Job, one of the reasons I love this book so much, is it has God's longest speech. Think about this for a minute. If you ever wanted to hear God speak, like this would be like God's YouTube channel. Okay, where would you want to go to hear God? Where would I look if I want to hear God? Like, I want to hear him talk. You got to read this book. Please, by the end of 2020, even if you don't read the whole book, which I highly recommend, just read the God speech part. His speech in here is absolutely amazing. And it's his longest speech in the entire Bible. And he's got some stuff to say. Job 38, 1-3, he starts out like this. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. So our first hint about God's mood comes from the fact that he comes out of a whirlwind. Not on a fluffy cloud, not with a ray of light, a whirlwind. And he says, who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. You who have the torn clothes because of his very genuine grief, I will question you, and you shall declare to me. One of the things about God is that if we're not in our place, God can put us there. Now, notice I said can, not will, because he's God and I'm not, right? But if we're not in our spot, and when I say our spot, like he's here, we're down here, if we're not there, he can absolutely put us there. Put a little bit differently, sometimes I'll tell people, if you don't humble yourself, God will. And I can tell you guys from experience, I'd rather humble myself. Okay? When God does it, it can be a little bit harsh and a little bit painful. And what God is doing here is he's letting Job and his friends know that he is still in charge. And he asked this question in Job 38, 4-5. He says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. And now you know God does sarcasm. Like, look at this. This is amazing. He's like, where were you when I created, you and everything you're standing on, everything you're sitting on? You must understand, because I've heard you guys blab on for how many days about me. If you got me all figured out, please go ahead, just tell me. Who am I? Who am I, the great I am? And of course, at this point, they need to go right back to where they started, right? Which was silence. Job's three friends get remarkably silent, and you'll see in a minute that Job starts to get it too, and he gets quiet. We can't read through the whole thing just because it's too long and awesome, but one of the things he says that I really appreciate is his comment and question about hawks. In our backyard, in our house, it faces this power line, and for about the last couple of months, this power line has been this perch for, I'll just call him a junior hawk. He's not a fully grown adult hawk, like he's not big enough, but he's not a baby in a nest. He's like getting there. And he goes up on this power line, and during the day, me and my kids, we get to watch him. He kind of struts his stuff, and he's not as big as an adult hawk, so kind of puffs his chest up, and he's looking around, and he's got to figure out how to hunt, right? And I love hawks, I love falcons, I love eagles. I just have so much respect for like their vision and their speed and their power. And God asks this of Job and his buddies. He says, is it by your wisdom that the hawk soars and spreads its wings toward the south? I mean, if he was talking to you and I, said, just pick your favorite animal. Did you make them? Did you design them? No, I did. And God further says in Job 42, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? Anyone who argues with God must respond. Shall someone who finds fault contend with me? Anyone who argues with me has got to respond to me. You guys have been sitting here for how long arguing amongst yourselves about who I am? I'm here. Anyone want to argue? We have got to be so careful with what we say about God. We already established we've got to be careful when we talk at all. But when we talk about him, we have to be so careful with what we say. I have heard people say some pretty extreme things about God this year. If it's not out of this book or 100% consistent with this book, guided by his Spirit, we just shouldn't say it. And God pretty much puts the words in our mouth, and he says, if you're going to do it, you're going to have to contend with me. Job starts to get it, and Job 43:4 says, then Job answered the Lord, see, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Job's starting to get it, and he says, there's not much that I can say. In fact, there's really nothing to say. With God, silence is absolutely golden. I've long loved the notion of silence is golden. I love the song. I've got young kids, so silence is like a premium, right, in my life. So I love this idea that silence is golden. But with God, whew, it is perfection. To be still and know. To sit quietly in the presence of God and acknowledge that he has all of this under control. 2020, 2021, 2022, God willing, whatever it looks like. He has it under control. One of the other things God says in Job 41:1, because even though you can see Job starting to get it, God's not done. And he says, hey, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook? Or press down its tongue with a cord? Now for them, and they didn't have an understanding of like aquatics and water and the ocean and everything, they had this image in their head of a giant like sea dragon. Picture like a sea dragon or a sea snake, and it was a Leviathan, and it was huge. And he's like, can you guys draw that out with just a fish hook? Can you press down its tongue, this monster that you are horrified of? You're horrified to bring your boats around it. Can you press down its tongue with a cord? And the answer, of course, is no. And Job answered the Lord, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Now Job gets it. We should all declare this. I know, God, that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. All things. All things in bad years, all things in good years, all things for all people, whether they believe in God or not. I know, God, that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Not by a rough year, not by a virus, not by a decision by a government leader. There's nothing we can do to take God off course. We can't do it. That's humbling, and it's so hopeful. One of the lessons God has for Job and for all of his buddies is that humility is on the road to hope. If we want to get to a place where our hope is in the right direction, truly towards God, not the world, not the situation, not the circumstances, we have got to humble ourselves, or he'll do it. But the good news, and this is seriously, seriously good news, is when we're humble, we're in a perfectly right place for God to use us. He uses the humble, he opposes the proud. And he finally gets them to a place where they say, okay, God, you're in charge, we're not. We have a limited understanding of who you are and how you work. And when we're there, we're in a perfect spot for him to blow our minds, to do things again that are beyond all that we can ask or imagine is what the word says. But we have to be humble enough to acknowledge that he's in charge and we are not. Now, God is about to do something after he has his amazing speech. He wants to put his friends, Job's friends, in their place. And he's about to do that until Job does a very interesting thing in the book of Job. We're told that Job prayed for his friends. Now, here you might have noticed that I don't have friends in quotes because at this point we can tell these are truly Job's friends. These are the three friends, remember, that says, hey, Job, we've sat with you for 7 days and 7 nights, and we've mourned the fact, right, that you're grieving, and we acknowledge that you've lost literally all of your property and all of your livestock, and oh, by the way, all 10 of your children. Now we just want to let you know, Job, that basically that's your fault. You're suffering, Job, because you have done something wrong that's led to this. And Job endured all of those comments and statements from his friends. And he now knows that God is about to put his friends in their place. And rather than root God on and say, God, go get them, he prays for them. He intercedes for them. He shows God's love for his friends. And so we're told that when that happened, the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before, when he had prayed for his friends. It's so important that you understand the timing and how this happened. God restored Job, and he gave him not just restoration, he gave him twice as much, right? He did that not because Job did anything different. This isn't a situation where Job goes before God and says, God, I'm sorry I've been sinning for all this time. And I accept your forgiveness, God. And God's like, okay, good job, Job. Now go and sin no more, and here's all your stuff back. That would be simple retribution. God's not limited to that. God restored Job because Job believed differently about God. That's what changed in this story. Job finally understood who God is. In his power, absolutely. In his not limitation to basic concepts like retribution, that his mercy is bigger. Even God's justice, with a capital J, is bigger than these simple concepts that we have. God restored Job and blessed Job because Job started to believe differently about who God is. And then God restored Job because Job showed the mercy of God. When Job could have cheered God on as he punished his friends, he prayed for them. And I think in that moment, God saw he had gotten Job's attention. And he realized not only does Job believe God's a God of mercy, Job believed if I'm going to believe in God and follow God, I have to be a person of mercy. And so he started to show that to those who had hurt him very much. My hope and prayer for us as we step into this next year is that we don't question God. He's still in charge in the rough years and the good years. He is as present and as in charge now as he was a year ago and as he will be next year. May we not Question who God is, his grace, his truth, his mercy, his forgiveness, his love, and absolutely his power. Question the world? Absolutely. If there is one thing we have learned from this year, is that we should absolutely question the things of this world. This is why God said, don't put your hope there. We can't do it. Question here. Question all the people here, not God, here. And be so careful in who we put our hope. May our hope be not in this earth, but in the one who made it and who is still very much in charge of it. Let's pray. God, we are so grateful that you are in charge. I remember even when this virus came to light and the pandemic started, just being so grateful that you are in charge and not us. We now come to the end of that year, and whether we see relief in sight or not, we still remember you are absolutely in charge. God, we love you. We apologize. I apologize, God, where I looked for hope in this world, where I looked for a light at the end of a tunnel that I can even see on this earth. And we remember that we don't find our hope here. We find our hope in you. And you are not limited to viruses. You are not even limited to 365 days a year. You are God. And we are not. And you are a God that is always good. You're good in Genesis, you're good in Job, you're good in Revelation, and you are good now. And we love you and we trust you. And I pray that we will have a hope in you that allows us to be a light to this world. We love you. We thank you for all that you've done for us and all that you will do for us. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.